Welcome to Game-Based Learning webinar. I invite you to subscribe to receive notifications of webinars like this. Also, we have periodic promotions where we give away PCS Adventures programs. This webinar is hosted by PCS Adventures. PCS Adventures has been around the block for a long time. They launched in 1988 and it has evolved. It started as an after-school program in Boise, Idaho, and then it expanded into a network of hands-on learning centers across Idaho, then Washington, and then California. The programs were so successful that we evolved into creating these packages that have all of the materials and awesome curriculum that are full of manipulatives to help students comprehend concepts that sometimes are a little difficult. With these manipulatives, it really takes things to the next level. You'll find our products from TK to 12th grade classrooms, out of school time, and summer time programs, libraries, maker spaces, and clubs, boys and girls clubs, YMCAs, and more. Today, I have the pleasure of having as our guest Grant Hathaway. He is the co-founder of STEMforge. He is leading the charge in innovative STEM education. He has over a decade of STEM expertise, empowering educators through hands-on, game-based learning. He is a passionate advocate for inspiring students to explore the world of STEM. Grant, thank you for being here with us.
Well, thank you so much for the introduction. And I wanted to just give a little bit of background. My experience prior to STEMforged is all about working with students and creating engaging learning environments, and doing that through all kinds of exciting content materials, writing curriculum on drones, rockets, electronics, robotics, you name it. And so that's been my fun calling in life, is creating fun learning experiences for kids. And that's really what led to this. So real quickly, just very short agenda. We're going to talk a little bit about why video games work as an engagement piece, 2 different avenues that you can take for using them, outcomes and technology requirements, and best practices for esports and game design programs. When it comes to engaging kids, video games, you might guess, tend to work really well. A lot of kids enjoy playing video games. And there's 2 sort of camps of thought here. Number one is, it's in some cases can become a problem. And absolutely, kids, too much screen time, too much passive consumption can definitely be a bad thing. However, using that interest and teaching discipline in the space and bridging it to better career paths is a wonderful way to meet students where they're at. At STEMforged, we see game-based learning as a blend of playing and project-based learning that allows students to participate in structured gameplay like esports, or creating their own games using game design. And both of those approaches teach STEM proficiency, collaboration, problem-solving skills. Now, on video games as engagement tools, there is research that shows game-based learning really enhances students' motivation, it enhances their comprehension, it enhances their retention, and in both STEM and social emotional learning environments. So there's a study, and I'll actually refer to a couple of studies here, but in the Journal of Educational Psychology, they found that students that are in game-based learning environments demonstrated 25% higher retention rates than those in traditional settings. And from UC Irvine, California, or UC California in Irvine, it highlights that strategic video games improve the cognition, flexibility, and problem-solving skills of the students that play those games. Quick note on those studies from UC Irvine, they're amazing. There's a lot of awesome research about game-based learning and esports that comes out of, or that did come out of UC Irvine. And there's good and bad for that, and I'll explain it a little bit. But why video games work. Number one, obviously, on its face, kids love video games. They're fun. Like they're made to be fun, and so they engage kids, right? They create an active learning environment when they're used in an educational setting, and it naturally encourages students to think critically, to strategize, and to engage in problem solving. It gives students motivation in the form of competition or rewards or progression mechanics, and that can sometimes be used as sort of a band-aid fix over getting kids to be motivated just by assigning like a quick sticker to it. But it can also provide students with a lot of that initial impulse, like even though it's superficial, in some cases, it may drive them to start to want to learn more and then build something that's more long-term for them in terms of like intrinsic motivation. Once they start to see that they're learning something, once they start to progress in a topic. Active learning is, and I'm sort of contrasting this to passive consumption. When they're playing, when they're in a video game sort of environment, it requires them to analyze, to make decisions really quickly, to adapt. And in games, students are used to a failure feedback loop, which means they can try things and they can fail and they can try them again. And because it's in a format where they're used to trial and error, it allows them to iterate, to experiment, and to develop resilience. So let's go to the two different ways that you can kind of implement games. The first is with esports. And esports, just for those of you that may not have heard of it, esports isn't just playing games. It's a organized team of competitive gameplay, and it's for specific games. So games like Rocket League or League of Legends, these games that are made by AAA studios that are available that kids can go buy and play, but it's in a format where they're on a team. And it looks a lot like another extracurricular sport or an after-school club. And the benefit of esports is that you can use it to develop collaboration and leadership and resilience in your students. There's also academic applications. You can have, studies on physics in the games that are physics-based. You can use games like Hearthstone to talk about probability, or use League of Legends for data analysis. For those of you that don't know League of Legends, it is one of the most complex games out there. And there's a lot of math and data that goes into that game that kids are jumping into because they just love the game and they want to get better. There's also a lot of cross-curricular connections. Esports can integrate with writing assignments or with broadcasting or podcasting, CTE programs. There's a lot of tie-ins there. Now, for the other side, game design, right? It's still leveraging video games, but it's in a totally different format. With esports, they're playing. There's more of a focus on that team environment and working together as a team. When it comes to game design, it's a lot more of a STEM skill development focus. And designing a video game is a lot of different STEM fields in one discipline. So it's coding and programming. There's 3D modeling and animation. There's physics that they use to create their games. They use math with their variables and manipulating things and creating probabilities. There's engineering if they want to get different components physically working together. It's a lot, and you can make a lot of tie-ins to other career paths. The way that I describe game design is it's kind of a singularity in the sense that you have a lot of student interests in different things. Maybe they like art, maybe they like to code, maybe they love video games already. You can bring a lot of those interests to the table and get these kids, these students, to buy into participating with game design. Now, you also have a lot of other career opportunities that bridges to, because there's, being an animator, software developer, software engineer, 3D modeling. All of those different career paths can be reached by that. That's why I call it the singularity of game design. So it's a great way to bring more kids to the table and introduce them to more career paths. So let's do a quick focus here on esports. So fun fact, esports, it's called sports. It stands for electronic sports. And real quick naming, there's some back and forth on, is it capital E, is it capital S? It's the same way you would use email. Just fun fact there. Another fun fact is it's the largest spectator sport in the world. The 2019 League of Legends World Championship. So that's just one video game. That had more viewers than the Super Bowl that year, which is crazy. There's so many people that view these games, that watch people stream them. It's kind of a this generation phenomenon that instead of going on and playing a game themselves, a lot of them will opt to just go watch somebody else play the game. And it's sort of the same experience as watching somebody play a sport. But when it comes to this team environment, there is a lot of strategic thinking. When we have esports programs that we put together, we are encouraging students to think strategically together, to break down gameplay and analyze the situations that they're in, to review the decisions that they made, and to rehearse how they might make decisions in the future. And it's a mirror of real world problem solving scenarios that they're going to have in their careers, in their future, like school. There's so much teamwork and communication that goes into esports programs as well. Success in an esports environment completely relies on effective communication, on call outs, on rehearsing strategies and contingencies among team members. And this can happen even at a middle school level. There are middle school teams that are out there operating, communicating with a high degree of efficiency that you would want to see in any corporate environment. It's really, really an awesome environment to teach those skills. And just on the note of learning skills, it is such a wonderful environment to teach skills, whether it's leadership skills, outside of the game skills or in the game skills. Students gain an understanding of how they set these goals, how they build these skills through practice, through training, through trial and error, and then grow as a person. So I can't say enough how much I really enjoy seeing esports put in practice. And I personally have seen a lot of students' lives totally change because of what they're learning just in an esports program. So it's really recommended that if you don't have an esports program, start doing some investigating. I can't tell you enough how much it's made an impact in the kids that we teach in their lives. Now, there are some hurdles when it comes to implementing an esports program. And if any of you have done a little bit of investigating, the first thing you might have run into is technology, equipment, things. And I will say one of the hurdles is you do have to have the right equipment, just like any sport. So if you've got football, you're going to have football pads, football equipment, football field. Basketball, you need the courts, the ball, all that. When it comes to esports, the equipment is the computers, the machines. So it's important to have Windows PCs that are powerful enough, and that power generally is coming through a good graphics card. That's really the main thing there, is you want to have something that's it has enough horsepower to run the games. Now, the good news is if you do have something there, or if you need to acquire something, you can sort of dual purpose those machines. If you have a esports computer, it's also a really awesome makerspace computer, and you can use it for things like teaching Adobe or 3D modeling or whatever else is sort of a CTE technical career path. So when it comes to finding funding for stuff like that, that's a really good route to say that, it's multi-purpose. Other things that you need for esports, probably less multi-purpose, are going to be the esports peripheral. So having the right keyboard, mouse, having the space to sit, having a headset, having controllers for some games, and then lastly, having high-speed internet. The rule of thumb here is you want about 10 megabytes of internet speed per computer that is operating. So a 15 megabyte speed internet connection is not going to be recommended for hosting like 6 students playing at one time. that 10 megabytes per device is really kind of what you want to get to, just so that they can compete. Because the last thing that you want, if you're running an esports program and you've done all this practice and you go into competition, is for your team's computers to lag out and cost them a match that they've really been looking forward to. So PCs, peripherals, and bandwidth, that's the main three things you're looking for. Now, once you get that, once you get your hardware in place, there's another element to sort of prepping your esports programs. And I like to call this macro versus micro planning, because we run into this a lot. A lot of successful esports programs will not just look at the big picture, right? But you need to look at the big picture. You got to have the buy-in from your administrators. You have to have the equipment. You have to have people. You have to have a league that you're participating in if you choose to be more competitive. But what a lot of programs will skip is the micro planning. And what that looks like is they get everything, they check all the boxes, they get the kids excited, they show up, and at day one, they're there with the computers, and then what? And it sort of looks like they just kind of bring them together and say, all right, we're going to jump in, go ahead and play the game, and let's practice. But they don't really have a plan for what's going to happen. There's not a specific skill set progression that they're trying to work the students through. So micro planning, knowing what the purpose of your program is, knowing what outcomes you want to have, and setting goals for your team and for your students, that's key, because that's going to help you drive what's going to happen every day. What are your coaches doing with the kids? How are they interacting with them on a day-to-day basis? Probably, I mean, besides having equipment to run it, the most important thing. Some quick tips and best practices for launching esports as well. Now, quick note on this one. And I said I would double back to these finds from UC Irvine. Here's what we see a lot of. People get really excited about the outcomes. A lot of research shows great outcomes, a lot of cool things that can happen for your students. And so they jump in and want to just go right to what those outcomes are. So they go outcome focused. And they buy the equipment, they get the kids in and say, we're going to teach you about CTE, and we're going to use esports as kind of this hook. And what happens is it sort of loses its soul as a program. It loses its core being as an esports program. So the most important thing to know about any esports program is, in order to achieve all the outcomes that you want, it must be an esports program first. And then the other things can all come next. So expansions to the program, like diving into shoutcasting, or diving into other CTE applications or social emotional applications. Adding those elements is fantastic, and you absolutely should, but it needs to derive from the core esports experience, not distract from it, because the kids will sniff that out right away, and they'll feel like a little bit of a bait and switch has been pulled on them. And that's going to have the exact opposite effect of engagement that you want by including esports. So expanding too quickly into adjacent topics without building that foundation can really just dilute kind of the whole purpose, the student engagement. So setting up for success looks like choosing the right games. Pick team-based games, educational friendly games. The one that I recommend to everybody the most is Rocket League, which is soccer with cars that has rockets on them, which is just sounds fun, and it is fun. The structure of the program needs to be clear. So setting your practice schedules, defining how competitive the nature of your program is going to be, focusing on skill building and sportsmanship to give the students a really good experience with esports before turning it into or introducing other topics. And then making sure that your stakeholders are engaged. So showing the academic benefits for if it's a school board that you need to get permission from, if it's school administrators that you need to, talking about the different scholarship opportunities and career opportunities that are adjacent to esports. Screen time and competition are sometimes major concerns. So being able to speak to the fact that, if we want students to have discipline in this area, then we need to provide them with the structure that shows them discipline in it. And then securing funding. The last thing would be looking for grants, looking for sponsorships, local partnerships. There are a lot of opportunities that can help with providing a lot of, if it's CTE, if you're in California, ELOP. Again, when it comes to esports, if you're looking for funding, one of the best ways to do it is to bring in some of those other things like CTE, broadcasting, etc. So having a very clear plan on showing how these machines are going to be multi-purpose, that you kind of have to walk that thin line between making sure students receive that core esports experience and meeting the criteria for funding if you are doing CTE programming. So I know it's a lot of information just around esports. So if you have questions, please be putting them in the chat, and we'll sort of cycle back to this one. I want to dive into the other side of the coin when it comes to games, which is designing games themselves. Now, this has kind of a sweet spot for me. So I said that my experience is all with after-school education. So I have some data from my after-school program way back in the day. And that's this chart here. So over 800 students that I worked with, which it was in an environment where students got to choose what they would pick to do, right? And they had rockets for a little bit. We stopped doing rockets for, as you can imagine. We had drones, we had robotics, we had 3D modeling, 3D printing, web design, videography, and then we had game design. And across all of these awesome choices that kids had, they were all really, really fun and engaging. 75% of the completed work, which we called them quests. So 75% of all of the quests that students completed were in game design. So 3/4 of everything that any student ever chose to do was game design. So that goes to show you how engaging, how much students want to do this. It's just, you don't see motivation until you have a student that's like, I need to make my dragon turn into a chicken when it flies through the portal. Like that sense of ownership that they get once they've learned a few of the fundamentals to create just about anything that they want, that is a magical thing. So game design is really, really important to me because it's really, really important to a lot of kids. So the few things that you need to know about game design is, again, there are technical requirements. There are a lot of nuanced troubleshooting that needs to happen with game design. There's debugging of code, there's debugging of animations, there's weird errors that you can get with 3D modeling, simply because the nature of video game design is so multidisciplinary. There's just lots of ways that students can run into trouble. And it's good trouble. It's challenges in creating something that they're going to have to learn how to overcome. But it's really important to understand the small little nuances, to understand the technology that you're using so that you can be a support to them when they do run into those issues. Because that gives them the freedom to explore more widely into what they want to create versus following a really rigid single project that sort of limits their creativity. But when it comes to technology, if you're using some programs like Unity or Unreal Engine, which very, very excellent programs, these are some industry standard game design softwares. If you're using them, it's a little bit of a technical hurdle because you will need basically the same as an esports computer in order to run that program. Now, I will say the obvious bias here is that STEMforge, we have a game design software called Blocksmith. And the benefit of Blocksmith over some of these other softwares is that it's Windows, Mac, and Chromebook compatible. So you don't need to have a sort of heavy duty Windows PC with an amazing graphics card. You can do all that you need to do, and your students can do all that they need to do with just a Chromebook. And that's been a really awesome bridge of accessibility for students who otherwise wouldn't be able to participate in a program like this and learn these cool technology skills to do so. So that's number one. Number two, it's school friendly. It's something that is intended to be used in a school environment. So there's cloud storage that's totally safe. It's secure. It's your own secure server that allows you to keep your student projects so that they can share them with each other. Because let's be totally honest, what fun is making games if you can't share them with your friends and play them with your friends? That's kind of the number one motivation there. So having those available to share in a safe environment that's accessible with the students' devices is really, really important in order for a program to succeed. So in order to make a program sustainable, there's a few other elements to this too. Number one is, I mentioned this a little bit before, you don't want to have just a single tutorial project that you're walking all of your students through. That sort of limits how creative they can be. Now, early on, yes, you definitely want to have it all under control. You want to minimize how many weird side paths they can go down. And with game design, there's a lot. However, you do want to have a curriculum that's going to be project-based, that gives them a little bit of freedom to choose what's being incorporated into their projects, that they don't understand necessarily specific techniques like how to make a frog jump, but techniques more broadly as concepts, like how you create an animation for an object, how you do nested animations on an object to create lifelike movement. Those are more important than following along one specific topic or one specific way of doing things. Again, tools, very, very important. Again, Blocksmith is a great way to approach this. If you want to dive into some of the other things, you can use bundles of tools like Unity with Blender, 3D modeling software that's very powerful, great for animations. Using that with a database in order to create multiplayer games, awesome, awesome solution. Again, you can do all of that if you have just Blocksmith as well. And then the last thing is having a planned sort of feedback loop of when students have completed their projects. It's great to hold on to those. Make sure that students get to keep them. Make sure that the projects from former classes can come back as examples. In some cases, I would say you could even take this one step further beyond Showcase and say, if you've got games that students are making, you could even assign your higher grade levels a project that is to create an educational game for your younger grade level, which in itself is sort of a showcase, but it's a showcase of something that applies to the learning that they're experiencing right there. So that's a really awesome thing that you can do with game design that you can't really do with other programs. So anyway, the key to game design programs here is really, again, it's all the magic of creating a video game. Creating your very first video game is such a cool experience. It's already a naturally project-based topic, but the engaging thing isn't it's the project, it's the result. It's when students have the freedom to create anything. And when you can equip them with the skills to put what's in their imaginations into the virtual world, that is the golden standard of getting kids motivated. It's a difficult thing to achieve. A lot of nuanced understanding is required, but if you can do it, that's going to be the most memorable course that your students have ever taken. And it's just phenomenal to experience. Key takeaways that I want everybody to have is video games. Leveraging video games is so important. Kids are already excited about them. For years, I've heard teachers ask and talk about meeting students where they're at. And I would challenge anybody to find me something that is better suited to meet students where they're at, introduce them to soft skill development and STEM skill development that also is as interdisciplinary and ties to as many different career fields. I would challenge anybody to try to find one topic that does more than that, because I don't think that there is one. When it comes to esports, the real benefit there, the teamwork, the soft skill development, and that in-game experience of being on a team and focusing on developing those in-game skills, that's another really huge thing that I want everybody to walk away with. Number two, technology needs. Technology selection is critical for anything that you do. That's a big roadblock, a big hurdle that I see a lot of programs run into. So getting that solved early and getting your technology ready first is key. And then lastly, focusing on those best practices will drive the learning outcomes that you want. And then with esports, remember, it always is about that esports gaming. The game experience first will lead you to the buy-in from students that you need to get those other outcomes to happen.
Very informative. And I'm still stuck on how do you change a dragon into a chicken as they're trying to fly through a portal? I mean, this is, you can see how anybody would like repeat and repeat until you get it done. So that is so fun.
I can tell a funny anecdotal story while you're thinking of questions, if anybody wants to. So that example there, that's a real example. I used to teach, like when I said we had 800 kids, those were all students that I taught in this sort of environment. And one of the most interesting things that happened was I had a student who came up to us and he goes, "Hey, I need some help with this. Like I need to have this, my boss, my evil, like the villain of the story. I'm I need some help." And I go over there to help the student out, and I see their boss, and it's this giant floating head that looks a heck of a lot like me. And I was like, what is, he's like, "Yeah, what do you think? I don't need help. I just made you. You're the bad guy." I was like, should I be like, I'm flattered, or should I be offended? He said, no, it's great. You shoot lasers out of your mouth. And he goes to show me, it's a head of me. And then there was another one of the other instructor, and it was just, we were the bad, like Andros from Star Fox, if anybody gets that reference. But just, it was the most thoughtful kind of experience. But yeah, they do all kinds of stuff, and it was just, they were so proud of that, and all the other kids thought it was the funniest thing.
On your website, I've seen so many different examples of games that students have created, and as you were mentioning, right, it's let their creativity go, right? Support them, and the things that they create are absolutely amazing. So I love it. I don't have any experience at all with esports, but I have seen you give a presentation before on the sky. What's it called? The rocket, the car rocket.
Rocket League, yes.
Rocket League, yes. That was so fun. I know several of my coworkers joined in and were playing the game, and they were like kicking a ball or something. And it was, I mean, cars were flying, and
oh yeah,
it was so exciting. So I can see how kids would totally get into it.
Yeah, Rocket League, interestingly, for those of you that don't know, it's you use a controller and you drive a car around and you try to hit a big soccer ball into a goal. And so you don't have to be great in order for it to be fun. Like if you're playing with a bunch of other people who are kind of your skill level, like maybe 0, it's super fun. But the skill ceiling is extremely high, and there's rockets attached to the cars. And what a lot of players will do is they'll be like flying their car with rocket boosters, controlling the car, and in turn controlling the ball as it flies through the air just by hitting it as they kind of maneuver around the ball. And what a lot of drone pilot recruiting companies, so like the Air Force, have found is that kids who play Rocket League are actually really good drone pilots, because it requires more skill and finesse to fly a sort of makeshift like car with rockets in a virtual environment than it does to fly a drone that's made for flying. So that's an interesting little tidbit that drone companies really like Rocket League players.
Yeah. Well, I can totally see that because they have to be thinking several steps ahead, and kind of learn a bit of what the boosters are going to do in order to be in a space where they need to get to. So, so that takes practice and it's a challenge, right? To learn how to achieve and get to it. But that teamwork process, though, that gets very complicated. And so there's a lot of communication going on, and the teams kind of, working off each other. And again, it's that communication that helps them get to where they need to be to beat the other team, right?
Yes, yes. So I see one question in here from Todd. So Todd's question for those says, you're interested in finding out what kind of programs or curriculum I'd recommend for a 6-week summer program for grades K through 7th. So on that, grade level is another really kind of key factor here. When it comes to esports, if you want a good traditional true esports experience, there are sort of limitations. I'd say 6th grade is really a great sort of bottom grade level for anything esports related. If you go younger than that, it's a little bit of a herding cat situation. So doing, meaningful skill development is a little bit difficult once you go lower than that. When it comes to game design, if you want to incorporate creating, their own games, you can have younger grade levels up, I'd say down to 4th grade, where you can have them building their video games. Obviously in 4th grade, it's going to be a lot more visual. It's going to be a lot more placing objects in a 3D environment and creating a little bit of interactivity. Whereas if you go up to higher grade levels, it's going to be more of you're coding, you're creating animation, you're creating event systems that work together across multiple levels and multiplayer. So it becomes more advanced just naturally, but it's still really valuable for that. When it comes to kindergarten, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, those grade levels, when it comes to video games, some games can be great as like if you have educational games for them to play and participate in, like small quiz games or whatever, but the developing of their own video game may be a little bit too advanced at that grade level. And I just say that not because I want to, I wish I could teach every kid that. However, I want to set you up for success, and that, I'd say 4th grade and up for game design, 6th grade and up for esports is a really good rule of thumb.
You guys are welcome to raise your hand. We can unmute you if you have questions. So that'll make it easier, and you don't have to worry about, typing.
Yeah.
Your questions in there. So feel free to raise your hand. You can find that little hand about 2 icons to the left of the hang up little red button.
Yeah. Last note for Todd's question. We actually have esports curriculum. We have game design curriculum. We've got the software available through PCS. So that would be my number 1 recommendation. Javier, League of Legends. Yes. So League of Legends, the game, are you looking more for information about the game, or are you looking for information on how to run a League of Legends program? If you want to clarify how to run a program. Okay, yes. So League of Legends, do you have a program going already, or are you looking sort of like starting from ground zero, trying to figure out where to go? Lego Fortnite. Okay. So you got a program, you're using Lego Fortnite, you're looking at ways to start League of Legends. My guess is you have a lot of students that are saying, we really want to play League of Legends. Yeah. Yeah, that's normally the go-to. Okay, so there's a couple things there. Number 1, League of Legends is, after school club. So League of Legends is highly technical. There's hundreds of different characters that the students play. It's a 5-on-5 sort of environment, and the different characters you select have strengths and weaknesses that lend themselves to your team's composition and affect like how you react as the opponent. So there's a lot of interconnected things here, and getting down to like the fine details of what sort of things you you play, like what skills you use when and how those skills work with your team. It's great. It's a phenomenal strategy game. When it comes to League of Legends, you don't need to have your own server, because the way that League of Legends matches work is you get your team together and you go up against another individual team. So a match isn't like a Minecraft server. It's more of just a multiplayer online game. Some schools are okay with playing games against other people. However, there is sort of a risk there because it's not a secured server. So the best thing to do would be to have sort of an internal, if you've got other schools in your district or other schools nearby, and you have several of them working together, that you can first start off playing against bots in bot matches with your team to practice specific skills. And then to test your skill against other live players, you would have a preset like match against an existing team. What you don't want to do in most cases, again, it's really up to the school. I know some schools do this. I just don't recommend it, is just putting your kids in a match against random people online. That's risky. There's no control over what happens in the chat. It's just can be a toxic environment. So we want to avoid that. When it comes to curriculum and teaching that material, we have League of Legends material. Again, League of Legends is, of all the games you can pick, the most complex. So there's a lot of nuance to that game. And if you've got students who are really, really good in it and they're asking for it, there is sort of a hurdle there, because they could step up and be leaders in your environment. They could step up and they could be really helpful and really lift those around them. Sometimes, and that's not the case. Sometimes their skill can make them feel like they're better than the other kids and make it a little bit of a toxic environment. So you really need to set those boundaries first, no matter what you do. We do have coaches that are really experienced in these games and can help set that and help bring all the kids' skills up together. If you want to learn more about that, please message us and we can show you what that looks like. And it is a free game. However, the number one thing is going to be students want to bring their own characters that they've unlocked. As they play, they unlock characters. So that some schools allow it, some schools don't. Some schools say we're going to start with all the basic characters, and then we have to use the school account and you unlock those as we go. So League of Legends and Rocket League, the only games that we're seeing on esports. Okay, good question. So I'd say the top games for esports in schools are Rocket League, League of Legends, Overwatch 2, and Valorant. And we're starting to see a lot more Marvel Rivals, if anybody has seen that one. Kind of like an Overwatch version, but it's all Marvel characters. On the other side, there's also some Nintendo games. So there's Super Smash Brothers is also extremely popular. Super Mario Kart, extremely popular as well. The issue with the Nintendo games is, number one, you're going to be really hard pressed to find any content because Nintendo is extremely protective of their intellectual property and they don't let anybody create any material around those games. So it's very, difficult to find anything meaningful there. The other thing is, if you're doing a Nintendo game, you have to use a Nintendo Switch. Now, hardware-wise, budget-wise, it's great. The Nintendo Switch is much less expensive than a computer. However, people sometimes run into a wall with your IT department because you can't lock down a Nintendo Switch the same way you can lock down a Windows PC. So some people will invest, the less money to get the Nintendo Switches and then run into just a big no from their IT department on implementing those devices. So be aware about that. You really want to understand what your school's policy is there. That's something to just be aware of. I'd say go into that with your eyes open, because the allure of the smaller price point for the Nintendo Switch may come back to bite if you can't even just use them. So
wonderful. Here at PCS Adventures, we have STEM program specialists that we'll be more than happy to answer any questions that you might think of after this webinar, or would like to find out what custom programs they may be able to put together for you in your environment, and what information they may need for their IT department to figure out what setup or arrangements can be made to facilitate these programs into your learning space. Thank you, everybody. Please, if you are not currently a PCS Adventures subscriber, we invite you to subscribe. You'll get notifications of other webinars that we have coming up in the near future. And we also do a lot of giveaways and promotions. So we'd love to have you subscribe so you are the first to get those notifications.
Yeah, thank you all so much. And everybody who attended should be getting the free
guide. Yes, the guide. Yes.
So it's kind of a quick start guide. It gives a few expanded tips on esports programs and some Rocket League specific material. So please use that. Feel free to share it. It's a great resource. And yeah, thank you all so much. I appreciate it.